Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you specific takeaway. All that way, your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, before I fully dive in, I would love to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, let's get into this. This past week, I'm made a sort of mantra for myself to just write. So I've been working on the first draft of this script for an animated movie that I've been developing. And yeah, I have an outline. You know, it's pretty detailed. There's like 68 bullet points. And so my goal is by May 17th to have a draft of this done. And in order to do that, I just need to write, right? Literally just get words onto the page. And just to take a quick step back, the reason for that is because May 25th is the Austin Film Festival submission deadline for screenplays, and so I'm trying to have something done by May 17th and then have a few days to polish it up and revise it and hopefully submit it. Now, as I've said many a times, if you've watched my other entries of my blog, you'll know that, you know, it's just a goal, right? It just kind of sets a pace and gives me something to aim for. But we'll see. I won't submit if it's not good. But it has been a good motivator. You know, I'm very good at revision, and that's all really writing is at the end of the day, is just revision. And so having stuff not on the page, you know, makes it a lot harder to revise. And really that's what writer's block is that we feel like it's not that, you know, someone's truly blocked. It's that what they know they're writing is imperfect, and therefore they don't want to write. And so for me, it was just, you know, every week I write a list of, you know, goals that I want to achieve, you know, my to-do tasks, and literally I put, you know, just write. That was it. And so that's really how I've been approaching it. And there are certain scenes that are very complicated and so forth, and I'll just kind of hammer out the rough idea and so forth, just to get me further down the path, you know. And as far as will I actually succeed with these deadlines, I think I can succeed with the May 17th one. Again, as far as like it being an actual script, definitely not. It's just, you know, from start to finish, it's all the things. You know, I'm on scene 58 right now of the 68, as I said. The rest of it is fairly well outlined, so it gives me enough to go off of and fill in the blanks and so forth, right? But in many ways, that's what we need to do, is just, you know, just to kind of move the ball forward. And whether it's writing or anything in life, just that sort of need for perfection is holding us back. And, you know, of course, we need to assess, like, in this sense, writing, yeah, it takes me time. But in this sense, it's free, right? It costs me the time, yes, but as far as actual finances, it's free. And I get to iterate these ideas and so forth versus, you know, imagine if I was already filming the movie and stuff like that, then, you know, other people's time gets into it and cost and so forth. So, you know, that's why I do like the development phase of projects, is because it really allows you to try out stuff essentially for free and let your imagination roam, you know, and that's your only limitation. And that's why in this sense, as far as writing, yeah, I understand, you know, I know what I have right now is not anywhere near perfect, but it progresses forward, and that's a key component. And so that's what I plan on doing, is literally I'll just keep reminding myself whenever I sort of get hung up that it's not good enough. Just write, just write, just write, just write, just write. It's okay. And, you know, I'll set aside even on days where I'm like, I don't know, I'll just get to it tomorrow, I'll have more time tomorrow. I'm just like, you know what, just right. And even if it's 30 minutes, an hour, just right. And, even then, once I do, I talk about this in other episodes, once you kind of sit down, the sitting down part is the hardest aspect of it. Once I'm there, it's really not that hard to write. And again, it's not to say like what I do write is of quality necessarily, but it's getting it onto the page and it can be molded, right? That's the most important thing. Because in my brain, of course, it's just like, it's going to be perfect and tomorrow I'll sit down with it and blah, 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 and I'll get to it, but you just kind of end up procrastinating that way. And eventually when you do finally sit down, you will realize that in your brain it was perfect, but on the page it's not. But the problem is the more you put it off, the less you have to work with, and the more your mind remained inactive in terms of that creative muscle. And so even on the days when it's not great, or it's seemingly not a lot is coming out, just try to get through it. Just put words on the page, even if it's like they fight or a major important scene has to happen here where, some person reveals a major secret and the other one is torn now with their loyalty and storms out. And even if you don't know what that secret is or whatever, just put it there as a placeholder because it has to happen, right? Just make that progress. So, creatively, that's kind of, not necessarily a lot to talk about, I understand, but certainly from a writing standpoint, that was the focus. And that's why I didn't put out as many episodes as I normally do last week, because I've been trying to focus on this. Even like for me, I'm someone who goes to the movies a lot to try to see, what's out there and learn from it. And also I just genuinely enjoy it. But there wasn't anything out that was like piquing my interest. Like some things, yeah, sure, I would have out of curiosity wanted to see perhaps, but I'm getting to a better place where I do have the joy of missing out on stuff. I don't need to necessarily see everything. I'm not a film critic. Sure, I like suggesting movies and kind of giving my opinions on them. And, I do believe there's a value in watching, as a storyteller, absorbing stories. And for me, the primary medium is film. So I do enjoy that because I always walk away with something, even if it's not a movie that I enjoy. Because I can look at it and, wonder, okay, what about it didn't work? Could it have been improved? Yada, yada, yada. But because of my focus on the writing aspect, I really was just like, there's not much that I want to see. So, these movies, like between me going there and watching them, some of these movies are like 2 hours long. It's just not worth it. So that time could be better spent writing. And so that's what I did instead. And I'm learning to sort of become better at that. Like same thing with TV shows and books too. I used to be sort of like a completionist. Like even if I didn't enjoy it, I'll just finish it and that'll be that. But now I'm just like, what? If I'm not enjoying it, just let it go. It's not a big deal. Because that opens up time for stuff that I can enjoy and do enjoy. So, for me, what I did end up seeing actually was I rewatched The Matrix with a friend of mine who'd never seen it. And so, to me, The Matrix is one of my favorite movies. And, I love, at this point, I love rewatching the movie, sure. But it's so special to be able to watch it with somebody with, fresh eyes. That's not an experience I'll ever get to have again. I've seen it so many countless times. I know so much of the lore. And sure, there's still new stuff that I continue to be in awe of, but I'll never see it in that same way as when I saw it the first time. And so it was cool to be able to share that moment. And I love, oftentimes when my mom visits, we'll watch movies and stuff like that. And I love sharing movies that I appreciate with her. yeah, that to me, like that's a love language of mine, is just being able to share movies, and when people enjoy them, that means a lot to me, right? I remember seeing Suzume, this film that is kind of on the tail end of its theatrical run at the moment here in the U.S., but it's quite possibly my number one movie of the year. We'll see what kind of comes out, but like so far, like even regardless of what's up ahead, I see it certainly being a top 10 contender. And I went with a few friends, and one of them doesn't normally see animated movies, and especially fantasy ones and stuff like that. And she was crying at the end of the movie because of how moved she was, and that's amazing, and I love that. I love that for the movie, and I love getting to share that, right? So that's fun for me. So I've been, get with the Matrix. That was kind of a similar experience this week that I had, which was wonderful. And also, too, speaking of Suzume, the same director that made that, his name is Shinkai. He also did this phenomenal movie called Your Name, and because the movie I want to make is animated and so forth, I've really just been deep diving a lot of animated movies and stuff like that. And so, Your Name is one that I'd seen years ago, and I noticed that there was a novelization of it. And so I went ahead and I got that book, and I've been reading that book pretty much like I'm 20 pages from being done with it. And, it's very, it's pretty much like beat for beat like the movie in that way, which is wonderful. But it still fills it out in a beautiful way. And what's nice about it is, obviously it's a novel, so it's not quite like reading a script, but it has that simplicity of a script, but you also get a little bit more internalization, so it fills in a couple of gaps, as to the mental psyche, just a little bit further than what might be inferred on screen. So I really enjoy that, as a way to kind of deepen my understanding of how I could write the script, and how I should be considering these things and characters' actions and story and all that stuff, right? So just examining, a story that I love, that I think, works really well, as do a lot of other people, and going further with it, right? To borrow from the Matrix, just going down the rabbit hole, seeing it from a, new way. And yeah, that's been beneficial to me. The other aspect that I've been working on this week is really just sort of creating a system for my finances. I work with the Financially Fit Foundation, and so we have a system called the SAFE system, which is spend in alignment with your values, not your ego. And so, I've been utilizing that system, and it's a very sort of, system that you have to, it's like accounting, right? You have to maintain it and so forth. And so I've been doing that, and it's been great to see, a growth in my results, just based on doing that, because I'm able to monitor it, and I know the levers to pull of, what's important, what's not, how to, achieve my goals in that way. And if you're curious, in my resources, there is a link to the Financially Fit Foundation, as well as the book called Save Yourself, which essentially highlights that entire system. So you can buy that on Amazon. And part of the reason, obviously, it's beneficial for me, but then also part and parcel of this is, we're creating these training videos, that can kind of scale up what we're doing with the foundation and working with the people that, we know this can benefit, right? So that's been fun to be able to continue. And speaking of training people, what's been nice is sort of, there's been an escalation in terms of people that want to do stuff with me and stuff like that, and it's wonderful. But obviously my time is limited, and I, as much as I would love to do so many projects all at once, I generally, try to limit it to what I do, overall. And even now, there's just, I love all the things that I'm doing, but, I would love to kind of take it lessen it just a little bit, because I mean, if you kind of look at it, just my own projects, right? I've got this animated feature that I'm working on. I've got my how-to film book that I'm working on. And the reason I don't talk about that as much is because that's being written alongside with a ghostwriter based off of, essentially journal entries that I've already written and transcribed. And so he's going through all those and formulating the chapters and so forth. And then, chapter by chapter, I give my input on. So that's moving well. At the moment, I want to get this script done before I return back to my second novel. And, that's been kind of a start and stop for me. But I do want to get a draft of that done by the end of the year. That's another goal of mine. So we've got those and, this that I do. And then a couple of projects with friends and stuff like that. And that's, of course, on top of my just quote unquote regular 9 to 5, right? And so that can be a lot, right? And so what I'm realizing, because there's two videos that I want to complete. Like there's a short film that I shot a while ago, and that I talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, where I at least laid out how the edit should look, and now it's kind of about filling it in and adjusting it and putting in the right B-roll. And so I'm looking to work with somebody that is interested, and kind of just helping me and get that over the finish line. And so part of doing that is I'm at this phase where I gotta start to sort of train people in my methods. And I always think all the stuff that I do, it's so second nature to me, and yet I take my skills for granted, and it's not good to compare. And I'm certainly not ragging on anyone else, but then, there's times when I work with other people, I'm like, oh, it's not so second nature. And so as part of that, right now, it really is about, okay, let me focus some energy on training people in the Phil Svitek method, if you will. So that way, they can, if there's other clients and they want to make money, they can make money, and it's at a higher it's a good standard, that people have come to know me for. And that way, I can recommend them without reservation. And likewise, if I ever need to step in, I know how to do so, and vice versa. If for some, if I want to go on vacation and stuff like that, people can fill in for me, and I know that there's no missing a beat, right? So that's very important to me. So I'm kind of focused on that as well. So yeah, those are kind of the overall main things. Some sort of just ancillary things that I wanted to talk about is this past week I was reminded of survivor bias. And the reason I was reminded of this, I saw this image on Twitter, an airplane, and it's bullet hits. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the story, in World War II, the airplanes that would come back, they used to assess them where the bullet holes were, and they would reinforce those places so that it was stronger, right? Obviously, that's where they got hit, so why not? Well, the problem, as someone smartly pointed out, after a certain amount of time, was what we're doing is we're assessing the damage of the planes that managed to come back, the survivors, when in reality we should be actually assessing and trying to guess at what the issue was with the planes that didn't make it back, because that's the real issue, not the ones that come back. So that's known as survivor bias. We take the lessons based on who survives. And this can be applied to many things, right? We talk about, when someone talks about business, they're a CEO and they're talking about, hey, I dropped out of college and look at me now, right? That could be a form of survivor bias because, sure, they were able to drop out of college and make it, but what about all the people that did that and didn't make it, right? Or, the Oscar speeches or commencement speeches, now that we're sort of at the college graduation season, all these different things, we just have to, not saying the lessons are bad and can't be applied, we just have to be aware of the inherent bias of someone speaking from a place of success, and what are the lessons and then takeaways, right? And some of it can be applicable, right? I'm not saying it's not. But then some of it is coming from that place of, yeah, I survived, but how many people didn't, right? And so, I don't have a great way to assess it. More so I'm posing it because I think it's an important question to pose to oneself, right? I think about it often in that sense. And, one of my greatest questions that I always ask people and myself is, if you knew you would fail no matter what would you still do? Right? Not what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Because then, of course, well, if I can't fail, then I want to be rich and I want to be famous and I want to do this. No. What if you knew you were going to fail no matter what? What would you still do? And that's a way of exploring, what brings you actual joy no matter what. Because then we don't have to worry about survivor bias in this capacity, because success is outside the realm of what we're looking for. We're looking for the journey, right? And I think that is really important, to find the joy within. With the stuff that I'm doing, my success is being able to create it. That's how I measure myself. It's not how well it does or whatever else. And, sure, I want people to have a good reaction to it. I'm not making this in a bubble and artsy movies that, no one sees. I want these to be seen and I want them to be commercially viable. But no, I still want them to have artistic merit and be interesting and take many risks and so forth, right? And so I think that's important, right? And, tangential to this is this notion that I was thinking about recently, that not everything has to be done for content, right? And when I use the word content, as a purpose, it has to move you forward in some sort of way. Sometimes just the inherent nature of it bringing you joy is enough. Last week I talked about going to downtown LA with a group of friends of mine to Smorgasburg, LA, and it's basically, food fair. There's food trucks. It's every weekend. It's in downtown LA, and it's great. And this was one of those things that, most LA people would just be taking tons of photos of and video, and, for all intents and purposes, it makes good content, right? We could, film, hey, here's me trying a Venezuelan hot dog, and ooh, what does it taste like? Okay, yum, 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 whatever, right? And rating the food and this and that. And sure, we took we took a photo, we took a video and stuff like that. But overall, we were just there to have fun. And it was so nice just to be able to enjoy that with people. And it was such a good group. I mean, as I think about it, and I was talking about it with a couple of friends of mine, what made it so great was that aspect that we really just wanted to enjoy each other's company, and we weren't there to let me just take, a picture of this, a picture of that, and okay, we need this, and let's pose for here. No, it was just, we were there to hang out. Number one. Number two, we got so much food and we all shared it, right? It was just grab and go. It wasn't hey, just, don't worry about it. We don't have a knife. Just pull and whatever. If you get a bigger piece, that it's more than half, whatever. And sure, it's not cut every which way. And, we even got some slushies and so forth. And we got these various straws and we're dunking them in each of the things. And we're just having a grand old time. Everyone's, buying something and we're all just sharing. It was just such a spirit of camaraderie, right? That was just infectious and fun, and, did it move anything forward in any way? Well, it moved our friendship forward, right? So why not? And I think we just overemphasize everything has to have some sort of purpose and so forth. And even just this idea of unwinding or I don't know, we just look at everything of well, how does it benefit me, right? Like, okay, it needs to fill my soul and so forth. And it's just like, just go have fun. Stop overanalyzing everything. I think that's important. I have a few other things I do want to talk about as well. But before I do, I would love to take the opportunity to also plug my Patreon. So if you appreciate what I do and think I might be a benefit to you in any sort of way, consider joining my Patreon page. That's where we can interact more directly. And yeah, it's only $10 monthly, so this is just one tier. And so, that way it's all manageable on my end. And also, people don't feel like they're missing out on anything. Everyone gets the same thing, right? So, if that sounds of interest, patreon.com/Phil Svitek. The topic of AI continues to be very interesting. Obviously, there's news and growth and so forth, more concerns and stuff like that. Like, it's just a constantly evolving space. And what's interesting, I've talked about it in various different factors, and I will continue to do so. And, some stuff I might change my opinion on, some stuff I might not. Who knows? That's the beauty of like being a free thinker. Like, you're allowed to change your mind based on new information and so forth. But one of the interesting parts to me, is still this idea that AI is very costly and stuff like that. And, I just look at like Netflix, right? And their suggestions, and their algorithm is funny to me because still to this day, like, they can't figure out what sort of movie that I would really, really want to watch. Like, I have to kind of really do a lot of searching for myself. And I know I'm not the only one. And so, if the algorithm can't even figure out what I want to watch, like, we're not there yet, right? And I'm not saying we can't necessarily get there, whatever that means in this sense, but it is fascinating to me how much we over-index the ability of AI. And as someone who utilizes AI in a very small way, I use Midjourney, I use ChatGPT, and a couple of things here and there, but primarily those are the two ones. We're still a long ways out, And as for the growth rate of this, like, I see improvement, but at the end of the day, like, a lot of times the results I see of various prompts, whether it be in ChatGPT or Midjourney or so forth, are cool. But is it the desired outcome of what someone wanted? Because I know for me, a lot of times it's not. It's close, or it'll give me inspiration for what I want, but it's not the final result. So, yeah, I don't know. I have tons more thoughts, and I've kind of shared various ones, but I just want to share this one today. The other sort of two things that I want to talk about, they're intertwined, separate of AI completely. But just this notion, maybe other people have a different opinion about this, and in fact, I know certainly some people in the world have a different opinion about this, but I don't consider, like, to me, loyalty is interesting because I don't think just because you're friends with somebody that another person dislikes, that implies disloyalty. I don't know, to me, trying to control who my friends hang out with or something like that is very controlling, right? And I'm not treating them as a human that basically has agency, and it's conditional friendship as opposed to an unconditional friendship, right? Like, be friends whoever you are, whoever you want, because, I'll like you unconditionally, right? Like, and I'm not saying I necessarily, exemplify unconditional, like, friendships with, various people in my life, but at least that's kind of more of the aim versus like, oh, well, you're friends with this person, therefore I can't be friends with you, I don't think like that, And now if I was grilling them for information, they were grilling me, and like that was kind of the basis of the friendship at that point, then no. I wouldn't want that, but I just think there's this inherent thing of like, let people be people, It's not your place to dictate who they should be friends with and who they can't. And this goes for friendships and relationships as well, I don't know. I have this philosophy, especially in like with romances, this idea that if you're not free to leave, you were never really free to stay. And so if you extend that out to friendships, it's like, okay, whether it's, a guy or girl that they're hanging out with, it shouldn't matter, right? Like, I should be able to trust them and give them that trust, because ironically, if I don't trust them, that's what has the potential to taint the relationship. And furthermore, if I'm so protective over them, then I'm not showing them why they should want to stay with me. And of course, they have free will. And so at the end of the day, like, if they decide to move on to somebody else, yeah, that hurts. But that was going to be their prerogative anyway, because if they were never really free to leave, they were never really free to stay. So if I'm like protecting them in this cocoon that, like if it, in my case, like, it's a woman and like you can't have guy friends, blah, blah, blah. Well, then she's not free to leave. Therefore, she's not free to stay. Again, it goes back to that control, and it's conditional. So yeah, I'm curious to know, I guess, how you think about this. Do you consider it like treacherous if someone you absolutely love is friends with someone that you absolutely despise? Like, how does that work for you? I'm curious, that sort of hypothetical. The last thing I sort of want to talk about, it's interesting to me, I was hanging out with a friend, and, we're going to hang out, and they were excited to hang out, and then their mood completely changed because they got news about somebody that they didn't care about, and it just swung them completely the opposite way. And it's just so intriguing to me how we just let so many things affect us. And listen, I've been guilty of it too, which is why for me, I've been going to therapy and continue to go to therapy and so forth to try to unearth these various triggers in me of like, why does that bother me? Like, because the interesting part, the person that triggered my friend, they knew they were a liar and that they weren't a good person, and like, they weren't somebody they were interested in whatsoever, and yet it had just such a negative foothold on them from the simple act of just lying to them. Over what? So it's fascinating to me, and this is, and I shared it in the last episode that for a lot of people, I realize that they're in a place of should, not a must. So, I think if we're being honest with ourselves, there's all kinds of things in life we know we should do better at, right? We should be better with our finances. We should eat better. We should exercise, more. We should go to therapy. Maybe we should read more. Whatever it is, right? Like we can identify the shoulds. But just because we know those things doesn't mean we're going to do them, and that's because they're shoulds, not musts. Must is something that, like, without fail, you're going to do, right? Like Jim Quick, who's a brilliant person that teaches people how to learn. He, very early on in his career, the story that he tells, and I forget the exact full details, so forgive me if it's a little hazy, but, I wasn't planning on giving this example, but I think it's important. So there was this woman, and she wanted to know everything about, like, essentially cancer. I forget what specific type of cancer, but let's just say cancer. And so, she went to the library and she took out all these books. And she devoured these books at lightning fast, and she was able to absorb the information and so forth. Why? Because for her it was a must. Because if she didn't, her mom essentially had cancer, and she was essentially trying to save her mom's life. So that for her was the ultimate must. She needed to learn all this stuff so she can help take care of her mom better and create a quality of life and elongate her life more so than the doctors were giving her. And, she was successful to a degree. But that's, she was, because that was like such a strong motivator for her. It's like parents in very undesirable situations, what the lengths they'll go to do for their child when their child is in need. That's a must, right? So there are things in our life that, through circumstance are turned into musts. And, for my friend, they look at it, they know they shouldn't be bothered by this, and yet, I know it ruined their entire weekend. And yeah, it sucks, to watch my friend sort of in pain over something, if it sounds frivolous, that's because it kind of is. And they'll be the first to admit it. And yet it has such a strong foothold on us, there's stuff in my own life that has seemed frivolous to others, that is frivolous to me, and yet has that grip. And I'm sure you can identify stuff in your life. It's like, why? Why do we torture ourselves through this? And yeah, we just have to question these thoughts and, find tools. And, for me, therapy has been luckily that. And now I can just recognize it of my own ways for myself. If something, it's oh, that's a silly thought. Let me just get rid of that. And it really is, with 6 years now essentially under my belt, it's becoming like that. A lot easier. So, do with that what you will. But, it's tough to see my friends suffer in that way, and I don't want you to suffer either. That's why, I call myself the 360 creative coach, because, the world can be a harsh place at times. If we don't learn to stand on our own 2 feet in the tempest of life, we can falter. And that's why we need to master mental fortitude. That's why I'm so adamant about it. That's why I infuse that as much as any of the skills and the talent. Because without that foundational aspect, you'll buckle at the knees. I see it time and time again, unfortunately. So, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I truly do appreciate you and hope to see you